defines quarrying activity. Certainly, if it was a defined term and we could peg it as such, I mean, it certainly appears that way from a common sense point of view, but in a bylaw manner, we need to have a definition for quarrying activity. And it's certainly not a permitted use on the property. So we've taken a look at all of our bylaws through this, this particular file. We're looking for evidence of the rock leaving the property, which then would be a contravention of the soil removal bylaw, which requires a permit to do that. And then there's quite tight controls on the volume of rock or soil that can be moved. The noise bylaws seem to be our only opportunity to be able to come up with a quick solution to this. And really all we're doing here is we're trying to clarify what has always been staff's interpretation of the noise bylaw. Unfortunately, from a legal standpoint, it didn't stand up, so what we're trying to do here is just better define what the intent of the bylaw is.
So could I just ask then, is it the suggestion of staff that we are going to look at other means? I think quarrying is probably defined, I can tell you, land that's defined through SANAC. So I'm just wondering, are there other means that we could look at in other areas?
Yes, and we will continue to do that because this, I think we've all learned a pretty good lesson from this particular activity. Where there's also possibilities where it may be considered to be a mining activity, and that's of course out of our jurisdiction. It puts it in the hands of the province. So there's that potential as well.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, I think, obviously I'm supportive of this amendment, but I think we really do need to look at what else we could do for this type of activity. As I said to one resident, you know, as a municipality, we pass a lot of bylaws, and you never expect certain things to happen, and then you get them. And so we do have to obviously look at our bylaws, and the wording we thought was okay, obviously had some challenges. So I just think that this is rural SANAC. I hope that staff will continue to look at this. I mean, what's the saying? If it walks like a duck, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck. That pile of quarrying rock, if it wasn't going off-site, I might feel different, but the size of trucks moving in to take it off and where to. So definitely supportive. I want the neighborhood to know that as council, we're trying the best to handle this matter in the most legal way possible, and hopefully this change will be helpful to the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
So I do have some comments, first of all. Members of the audience and residents, I'd like to first of all share the regrets that council have done, but also compliment you. You've put up with an intolerable situation for 3 years. You've not taken things into your own hands. You've tried to reach out to council and to our bylaw officers. You've gone through due process. At the same time, I do understand that you talked to the neighbour and tried to work as neighbours in the early days. Maybe it was a driveway, maybe it was a wall. But the most recent things I'm hearing that he wants to level the entire rocky bluff to make a vineyard. Well, those two items, to level the entire rocky bluff, doesn't make sense to me in rural SANAC. It seems to be a contraindicated purpose. And to make a vineyard where there is no fertile soil doesn't make sense to me. And I must concur with Councillor Brownhoff. I spoke to one of the residents on the phone. I could barely hear through the noise of the pneumatic pick. So it's intolerable what you've had. Now, that said, staff, once this bylaw was passed, pending its approval, what is the timeline of its arrival as an enforceable item?
I mean, through the mayor, it entirely depends upon the individual's activity, and so the changes to the bylaw, if the individual continues to work in opposition to the bylaw, then enforcement action can be taken. If he chooses not to, then there wouldn't be enforcement action. So it remains to be seen about any timing. We go through the same ticketing process. Depending on what the individual does in that process, it could end up backwards, of course, it could be in a court action. So I can't give you a time frame because it entirely depends upon the actions of the individual.
May I move it to a hypothetical then? Let's imagine the bylaw is passed, it's in place, and tomorrow the individual breaks or contravenes the bylaw. What's the soonest he would be ticketed to stop the operation?
Through the mayor, I'm hesitant to provide advice to the community and council on the basis of hypotheticals. However, given the interest here, it's clear that staff are taking a close eye on this. It does come down to whether or not the bylaws are being followed or not. We always work on as you well know, bylaw enforcement is a reactive process, not a proactive process. It's based on complaint. That is the unfortunate circumstances based on resources and application of bylaws in this government. However, presented with a similar case, hypothetically, where someone contravenes the bylaw, staff would take similar actions. Ticketing to start with. If the individual refuses to comply with the bylaw, then could be moving forward to court injunction to prevent the activity from happening. That could take months for that to happen through the courts. So as I said, I'm hesitant to give you timelines based on hypotheticals, because it's very clear that this is a significant issue for the community locally, and certainly something that staff are looking at. And I would go beyond that to say, we're talking about a noise bylaw here, and there are other issues that have been raised both tonight and through previous discussion where there are some other bylaws, potential bylaw contraventions that have come up in those discussions that we will be looking forward further to Mr. Farmer. Refer to that in his presentation.
Very good. So just because everyone's in the room here, if we move forward on a quarrying aspect of quarrying and the removal of soil or rock from the property, is there a timeline on that sort of process that the residents can understand?
Again, through the mayor, you're asking me to respond to hypothetical situations without any details. That's very difficult to do. However, staff takes seriously any complaints about contravention of bylaws, and there are processes that they can go through for enforcement. From the kind of, I guess the higher level looking forward, working towards voluntary compliance with the bylaws, to more strenuous actions for the courts. And it really depends on the situation as to the timeline that's required to gate that kind of compliance with the bylaw.
Thank you. I'll share one more observation. Having visited the property and seen the trucks coming off, I did make some inquiries around trucking colleagues that I have, and apparently if the trucks are coming off, it has to be going somewhere. So I wonder with the bylaw investigation if we could be monitoring areas where the goods would be taken to and what is happening to them. That seems to me quite a straightforward aspect of something that could be added to this. But clearly, this is an intolerable situation, and once again, sincere regrets you've had to put up with this for over 3 years.
Councillor Haynes, can I just direct you to, thank you, just for format here, we need to debate amongst ourselves. We put a motion forward on the floor for the first bylaw, and the purpose of this portion of the meeting is to debate amongst ourselves and then to carry on a vote. When we're addressing the audience, we're not fostering that debate. So if you can focus your comments on councillors and that discussion, that would be most appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Plant, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask a question before I speak in favor of the motion, so to avoid all spoilers. I would like to ask of staff, what I'm seeing as the big change is the provided a valid building permit. There's one of the changes is provided a valid building permit has been obtained. So my question is it likely that an example such as what's been happening on Hector Road would be able to qualify for a building permit to create a vineyard? Or even just to establish a garage or a shed?
Well, a building permit wouldn't be required to create a vineyard. It's not a structure. It's not something that's covered in the building code of the building bylaw, so a permit would be required. That's more of a land use question. In terms of whether this particular property owner, again, it's very difficult to comment on hypotheticals. But it is possible that the person could make an application for a building permit or something and undertake work. It could include this kind of excavation in association with that permit. Or there are timelines associated with building permits in terms of a period of time for construction to actually get underway, and the timeline for completion of the building permit under the bylaw. So the linkage of it to a building bylaw has some additional criteria in terms of work progressing and moving forward on construction of that thing, whatever it may be, and completion of that construction.
Okay. The reason why I ask, and it may result in a subsequent question, is I'm concerned about, in this particular circumstance, that a building permit is acquired to build a structure, and as part of that building of that structure, further work is done to remove rock and to continue quarrying, or any activity to remove rock from a certain position. Is there anything further within Saneach's control to prohibit that activity from happening? Or is it, and I would imagine we have no means to deny a building if it's appropriately received and processed and fits into the community plan, or is there any way to restrict?
If I can just add briefly, one of the challenges we have here is we're trying to always at this council is to create laws that make sense for the general case. And it's not to craft a particular bylaw for a particular incident. In this case, we have what we're viewing as a loophole. Essentially, we're trying to close that loophole. But we're not looking beyond that at this point. We're looking for common sense to be put into the bylaw. And so you're looking for particular cases, and you're trying to kind of, I think, massage it a little bit through hypotheticals, and I'm not sure we can really go beyond that in this motion.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. I think for me, given the feedback I've had from the neighborhood and the residents who approach me, whatever is possible may be done. And so I'm looking to see what other mechanisms are in existence. I appreciate that we may need to come back at another time to deal with that. So I will leave my comments at, I'm in support of this bylaw amendment, and I echo the comments of my previous speakers about the sadness I feel for the residents of the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next on my list is Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be supporting this motion. I'm kind of astounded that really this much time has passed before hearing from this neighborhood, and like has been said, I want to comment on the exemplary way in which the neighborhood has come forward to bring their concerns to us. We see in our notes that we have had legal counsel on this. I think that is wise. We have to operate within a framework ourselves of doing things in a legal fashion. Obviously, tonight it sounds like this is going to pass, which is great. I caution ourselves that this is probably the easiest part, the paperwork, because then follows potential enforcement, potential legal ramifications. But I think that if we do support this, we are showing our residents that we do hear their concerns, that we have heard here tonight that this won't necessarily be the end of our tools. If there are others that can be brought into play, that we may have another item before us at some point in the future. But I think given where we are, and we do operate within a legal framework, and that we will establish a bylaw, and then those who are charged with enforcing it and taking it to whatever end that might be, have their job to do as well. Our job is to consider this bylaw and to give it support.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanders for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be supporting this tonight, and through the conversation, though, I think there is more possible, could be possibly more work to be done. It's a concern to think that there, could be actual quarrying in the rural areas. I thank the neighborhood very much for their well-organized presentations just to make us aware of the situation, and yes, they have been long suffering, and it's amazing that that's taken place as well. I was going to ask the question about whether there was a potential that a permit could be denied, but as that question was answered, I saw it unfold and see the situation that we're in. So I'm certainly, supportive of this going forward now. I'm hoping this will a remedy at the end of it, but at least it means that we can proceed with enforcement, and the other issues that are being raised, I think, are very valid, that we need to look at. So, again, I'm supportive.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much to add beyond what my colleagues have said. At this point, I want to thank many members of the audience who came to speak to us this evening, those who probably said a lot just by standing to demonstrate the profound impact that the operation out there has had. I think my colleagues have offered regrets, apologies for the circumstances. I'm hopeful that the changes that we're making this evening will provide some relief, but as my colleagues have said, this is really just the enabling piece. It's the enforcement that will be the challenge, and from there, perhaps further changes or enabling tools will be required in order to bring a more permanent sense of relief for the community. But I'm pleased to, at the very least, take this step to provide some relief to neighbors.
Thank you. Councillor Dermott, did you still have your hand up?
Yes, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to offer some comfort to the residents because there's been a lot of talk about what could happen. And I don't want to speak in hypotheticals, but what we are doing is tying this to a valid building permit. And building permits generally have time limits and times associated with them. So hopefully the individual, when he finds about changing the bylaw, will comply with anything else. But there shouldn't be a situation, in my view, where it could go on for years or extended periods of time in the future.
Thank you. Just a few quick comments from me. I'm also going to support this. It's a very difficult situation. I want to remind everyone in the audience and to encourage them that as a council, our job is to listen and to act. When issues come forth, often a letter comes in and it raises a level of awareness, and then it exists in the community, and folks are talking in the community about the issue. Please bring it to us, big or small. Let us know. Get the neighbors together. Call us, visit us. My office is always open Tuesdays and Thursdays for these kinds of issues. We need to know about these things early so that when there are issues, they don't impact health for the long term. It's very important that you engage with us so that we can understand what the issue is when there is an issue. In this particular case, it's very difficult, but it seems to be a case of giving an inch and then a mile is taken. It's such a massive operation for a rural area. It really is, I think, hard to justify. However, having said that, there are justifiable means and reasons for doing this kind of work, and our laws have to be crafted justly so that they apply equally to all and so that they make sense. And we will endeavor to do our best with that, with the passing of this law, and we will move forward. So with that, I will call the question on the first reading of this bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That motion carried unanimously. Would someone like please put a second reading?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Dermott and seconded by Councillor Brown. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That carries unanimously. Would someone like to move third reading, please?
Second.
Moved by Councillor Dermott, seconded by Councillor Brown. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carried unanimously. Thank you. So just a note for the audience, there'll be a final reading of this bylaw at a future date in March, so it's not in effect at this time. It will happen for the final reading of the bylaw. Thank you to all our speakers. With that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. I have one Madam Clerk. Would you please introduce the item?
Resolutions for adoption. Our first item is a report from the Director of Engineering, dated February the 16th, recommending Councilor Offshore as outlined in the report to implement the automatic passing.
Okay, just going to hold on a second while the gallery clears. Thank you all for coming. So we're ready to go. So introduce the item. Director of Engineering, James Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a supplemental report to Council Chamber renovations report that Council considered on December 14th. The Council motion is item E+1 for discussion at future Council meeting. This report recommends two options for consideration by Mayor and Council for webcasting. The two options essentially differ from having a single camera with a single view of the chambers to multiple cameras that would have multiple views of council staff and speakers. The costs are consistent with the funding dedicated in the 2015 financial plan. And further, council chamber renovations have been separated from the report, and a plan to move forward is outlined in the next agenda item. Further details regarding webcasting are contained in the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions Mayor and Council may have.
Thank you. So Councilor Murdoch's hand up first, and then Councilor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to our Director of Engineering for the supplemental materials. I want to thank, first of all, staff for splitting out the two pieces, webcasting and the chamber renovation. I think dealing with those two things separately allows us to proceed more quickly. So I'm very supportive of seeing that take place. I just had a question, clarification around the operator for option 1 and option 2. I suspect there's more to it, but what I read in the report was that it's really an operator's on site for support, and then any changing that might take place in option 1 between the presentation materials and the main camera. So I guess my question is a very simplistic one. If we didn't switch back and forth between the materials, would we need an operator?
Through the Mayor and Councilor Murdoch, we talked about this before amongst staff and looking at option 1 and trying to even simplify that even further. The difficulty is really separating away from an operator or the additional time needed for staff to sync the agenda later with the webcast, so for archiving purposes. So that is still a function that we need to exist. And as such, essentially the same level of operating will be required for that support the additional day. So there really wasn't much to separate between a single camera option and getting away from an operator. An operator is recommended in this case to do all of that at the same time during the live council webcasting, so that immediately following the council meeting, that can be archived on the website with the agenda synced to it.
Councilor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question regarding the ability under option 2 compared to option 1 in terms of the person viewing the online version, their ability to see what electronic presentations are seen by council. Did I read into this correctly that if we go with option 1, the person viewing does not get to share that information, but going with option 2, they would?
So through the Mayor to Councilor Bryce, what we're recommending in both option 1 and 2 is that would be a permitted kind of function, is that we would be recommending here that the presentation material would be synced with the webcast in both options. So if you're a member of the public and you're viewing it, your option 1 is a single camera or the multiple cameras, you will be able to see the presentation material.
Thank you. Councilor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions through you to staff first. First off, regarding option 1 and option 2, multiple, can you tell me what is inferred by multiple? Is it 1 versus 3, 1 versus 2, 4?
Through the Mayor, the question would be about 4 cameras. This was the consideration in this case. 4 cameras was recommended from the IT technologist, or tech, in this case for webcasting, to get a good view and representation of mayor, council staff, as well as speakers.
Thank you. Second question, just in the 2 options, I said it's a small amount, but it's $2,000. The on-site website production booth, what's the difference between one versus the other?
Through the Mayor and Councilor Plant, This is really a bookmark for cost for what this desk could be. The simplistic form with option one, as Councilor Murdoch was indicating, there is not much function that the operator needs space for that. With the multiple camera option, there will be need for additional screens to see what those other camera views are, and you're going to have more real estate space. So simply, there may be more customization required for that desk. And we don't know what that desk will look like at this point, but that gives us an allowance for that customization should we fit.
And a last question is there any way that the webcasting can proceed without council reconfiguration of the facility?
Through the mayor and council plan, yes, this is what's recommended for the report, that should the council proceed with one of these options, we would move forward with implementing live webcasting.
But it can be done, just to clarify, separate from any council chamber rejuvenation, reconfiguration, wiring, etc.
That's correct, that's what we're recommending.
Awesome sauce. As such, I would like to, therefore, having asked only questions, yes, awesome sauce, apologies, I will move that. I have only asked questions, I think I'm in permission. I will move option 2 and speak to it briefly if there's a seconder. That's okay, everybody. It's usually me who makes mistakes.
No, second by Councilor Haynes.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, the $1 million question has been answered with the last question. We were unaccepting of the huge costs for reconfiguration plus webcasting. And while nobody here wants to spend $150,000 on webcasting when people from the community have come in with their own cameras and done it for far less, I trust that the staff has come back with the numbers that they feel we can get the job done, and we'll get the job done well. If they can do it for less, awesome. And I really hope that they can. That being said, the reason why I'm moving option 2 versus option 1 is because that ship sailed when we passed the budget a year ago. And so if the public or anybody at this table says, no way, 150 is too much, we were all willing to pass that into the budget when we passed it a year ago. And so yes, we can now get it for cheaper, and if people wish to defeat this motion, I will understand that. But when I voted for that back then, was willing to spend up to $150,000 for the webcasting. I will also state that the 1 camera versus the 4 camera option will provide us a better service, and will, more importantly, provide our residents with a better service. I watched the CRD webcasting as an example, and it's atrocious. I listen and I can barely keep up. There is no option to see the speakers' faces, and there's no option to see the individual directors, and so 1 camera would be like catching us up to what is already a bad system. So while I would love it to come in at $5,000, when we voted last year to put 150 in, we kind of broke that threshold that we were already going to spend that money. The additional $6,500 could be recouped potentially even through the contingency spending. I think if we want our residents to be able to engage with us, we need to provide them a very effective webcast and not just the bare bones model. And I would therefore ask you to please consider option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Haynes, next on the speaker list.
Well, I hope that my colleagues' comment that nobody around this table will support the more expensive version comes true. I'm joking there. I'm going to support the motion. I think we have comments that this could be done for $2,000 or $3,000, but that's just the camera. We have a sophisticated requirement to mesh our audio system, to mesh our documentation system. And my question here on that part, we talked about syncing the agenda with the visual. Is that included in this package, or that's an additional piece? Yeah. So on that basis, I see that this is quite a different offer to what some people might think is just a camera at the back of the room. When we talk about the configuration of the tables, etc., when we go pending going to a 4-camera option, is this table the setup, or would it be a rearrangement of the tables into the horseshoe like we were talking about? I mean, what level of playing with the furniture are we going to be doing for the eye in the sky?
Through the mayor to Councilor Haynes, since a decision has been made around any configuration for council layout, we would be assuming probably something along the traditional setup, which is what we're set up today as. Should that change in time before implementation of the actual cameras, then we would obviously look to optimize those camera locations for the setting that's best purpose for it.
Okay, so then as we go forward, pending the camera location, once that's in place, does that tie us to a certain configuration of these desks? Or, for example, we did experiment with the horseshoe configuration on this floor. I'm not talking about raised dais or changing of doors or anything like that. How flexible is the 4-camera option for some minor adjustment?